Good morning, everyone. We have today with us one of the most influential economists in the world, Joseph Stiglitz, a Nobel Prize of Economics, professor at Columbia University. During your career, you have been an advisor to Bill Clinton. You also have been the chief economist at the World Bank. It seems that most of your career has been spent fighting inequality, therefore responding to the call you heard from Martin Luther King, which you explained very well in your last book, which was just published in France. It came out in the spring in the States, and it's already here in September for French readers, La Grande Fracture, The Great Divide. So this book is a collection of articles you wrote between 2006, more or less, and 2014. And it assembles your thinking about economic inequality. And it seems that you're creating a new branch of economics. And like yourself or Thomas Piketty, I think, would be within your gang. So do you consider this book to be a warning? Do you hope to rally the public opinion? And do you think it can affect public policy?
I wrote it precisely because I wanted to change the debate in the United States. After my previous book came out, The Price of Inequality, where I described how inequality was growing, how it was dividing our economy, dividing our society, undermining our democratic processes, and actually weakening our economy. The New York Times asked me to curate a series called The Great Divide, to bring to the American people what has been happening behind, without anybody noticing. And I have to say, I think it's worked. Yeah. The candidates in both parties have said inequality is the big issue facing the country.
And when you started the series, before the New York Times series, you wrote a very famous article in Vanity Fair talking about the 1% of Americans, the wealthiest of the country, where everything is geared towards, and lefting the 99% behind. And from that spurred the Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street movement. Now that we have, some time after this event, what do you make of the Occupy Wall Street movement? Was it worth it? Did it lead to anything? I mean, they were strongly inspired by you, but the financial sector is pretty much the same.
Unfortunately, many of that group did not believe in organization. And you cannot change our society without some sense of organization. So it has spawned, it has increased awareness of the issue, and it has spawned a whole civil society movement. So I was just at Jackson Hole, where all the central bankers from the world, including the Fed, were there. And I joined a civil society group called Fed Up. And it was fed up with the way the Fed has focused on Wall Street, on the financial markets. 100 or more people from all over the country were wearing T-shirts saying, "Whose recovery?" Pointing out that while the administration, the Federal Reserve say there's recovery, 91% of all the gains that occurred between 2009 and 2012 went to the top 1%, meaning for most Americans, there's been no recovery. Income in the middle in the United States today is lower than it was a quarter of a century ago.
That's probably what explains in the current Democratic primary, which just started, why the leftists are so strong. Bernie Sanders, people talk about Elizabeth Warren, and Hillary Clinton is not doing that well. Does it mean that there's really, within the country today, a very adverse sentiment against government because they have not helped the middle class?
Well, what I would say is that there is a very large group of people, you may call it the progressive movement, who feels the government has to step up, it has to do more. And what's interesting, Hillary, which is, you might say, the establishment, has put inequality at the top of her agenda and has come forward with a number of good progressive ideas to deal with the problem of inequality. So, and it's just amazing how Bernie Sanders, who labels himself a socialist, has been drawing huge crowds, 20, 30,000. This is unprecedented. no one is saying, oh, he's a socialist. What they're saying is he's somebody with ideas to help America deal with its central issue of inequality.
So not a long time, I think it's in 2010, you created the Institute for New Economic Thinking, and your last meeting was in Paris, actually, in the spring. I saw you there. And one of your guests was Yanis Varoufakis, the former Greek finance minister. When you see what has happened this summer and how Alexis Tsipras, decided to more austerity measures for a new bailout, have we learned anything at all? Because you wrote extensively about the Greek crisis, and
I'm afraid that the Greek people feel they're caught between a rock and a hard place. They want to be very much part of the euro. They identify with Europe. On the other hand, they know, like most economists, that austerity kills. It kills literally, that people are dying, but also kills the economy. GDP is 25% below what it was before the crisis. The new program, even the IMF says the new program will extend and deepen the depression. So you can imagine the frustration. Yes, there's been learning in the sense that they know this austerity is going to make their economy worse. The failure of learning, I'm afraid, is in Germany, where they say, well, it's sort of like medieval medicine when they did bloodletting and the patient wasn't recovered. They say, let's take out more blood. It didn't work, and this won't work.
So Germany has been very much criticized for that. And we have another crisis in Europe, and it's the migrants crisis. And this time, Germany seems to be taking the lead, and Angela Merkel, the first one, because they're letting a lot of people in. It's very difficult for us Europeans to deal with this crisis. As an outsider, how do you see it, and what should we do?
Well, the first observation is the point that you made. Germany is a very complex society. Within Germany, they believe very strongly in the European social model. So the kind of suffering that they are imposing on Greece, they would not accept inside Germany. And that illustrates the limits on, you might say, European solidarity. Much closer still, the nation state is still the point of identification. And, I think people had hoped that the euro would bring more sense of unity. It actually has failed. It's brought more divisiveness. The migrant crisis is a reflection of the huge inequality across the world, that as bad as things are in Europe, they're so much worse in Africa. And so it just reminds us of the great divide both within our country and the great divide between countries.
And probably time for action to reduce it.
Very, very much.
We're going to be swamped.
Exactly. You might say it's in our self-interest if we don't want to confront that to help our neighbors grow. And we have exactly the same problem in the United States with the
southern border.
With a southern border, with a large number of migrants. The weakness in the U.S. economy has discouraged some of that migration, but that's not a good way to discourage migration.
Okay, well, this is all for today, but thank you very much for being with us. And once again, your book is out in the French bookstores.
Thank you.
Welcome.